Okay, so it's 2024, and it hasn't taken us long to find our first reaction video of the year. And this is actually our first video, to my surprise, from TalkTV. I'm sure this will be the first of many. Let's get straight into it.
Israel is a democratic country.
I
Netanyahu
know
is
that
destroying
Israel is a democracy. They
democracy.
have elections.
No, this man is now has 4 courts against him because of 4 cases of corruption. This man knows if the war stops,
we haven't got time to do the entire history of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is not a popular figure in Israel. I'm not here to defend Benjamin Netanyahu. Mustafa, is it possible to...
Whenever I speak about Palestinian rights or Palestinian situation, you claim it is history. I'm talking about what's happening today.
No, I know, and
this is not history.
Can we just... You talked about how you don't want Israel. You're saying Israel, that October the 7th happened. You're placing that in historical context. I understand that. Please don't say that again. We don't have time for it. You've made that point 5 times already.
I don't know what you have time for.
Oh my God! For the love of God, let me finish a sentence, man. Maybe you're not used to women talking. I don't know, but I'd like to finish a sentence, sir. Anyway.
Okay, let's go to the woman in the room. First reaction.
Journalistic integrity aside, I feel like Julia Hartley has some, pre-existing beliefs and values that she already has. So when she's speaking to a certain demographic of people, let me speak about this man. She already has her own bias coming in. So this man is actually speaking facts. He's talking about the current situation in Palestine. He's coming with questions, valid questions, and her takeout is that this man is not used to speaking to women. I mean, how did she pick that up from this man asking valid questions on a topic that is quite heated and everyone has an opinion? You can't invite someone for an interview. But for me, that there's a bias, or she already has pre-existing beliefs and values that she has to speak to this man in a certain way. And well, he is, I'm not going to say where he's from, but how did she come up with the fact that he does not respect women and he's not used to speaking to women?
Yeah, I mean, he's so softly spoken. I think he's an MP. He's a very articulate, very intelligent guy that knows the facts very well. And she made the claim that Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. He says it's not a democracy, and he's about to explain why, but she won't allow him to. But to me, what strikes me from this video is, this is a man whose people have been carpet bombed for the last 3 months. 9,000 children have been killed. Over 23,000 civilians have been killed. And somehow, in this white woman's world, she's the victim. She's the victim. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how is that possible? How can you speak to a Palestinian guy who doesn't know the fate of all of his family members, and somehow you, from the UK, which is a UN Security Council member, which is one of the most powerful, wealthiest nations in the world, you've turned yourself into the victim when you're speaking on a TV channel where you're the host, where you have a regular slot on this show, and you're the victim. It's just, the Palestinian people don't have an army, a navy, any UN representation, a Royal Air Force. So that's something that I find very striking.
Because, I mean, you obviously, I mean, as the moderator of the interview, you are the interviewer. So you clearly know by the time you bring him into the studio to speak about this topic, you have an idea that he's going to ask all the hard questions. He's going to, present all the facts out there. This is what's happening to the Palestinian people. I feel like she already has her own agenda and opinions. So, and I think she forgot herself, and she's like, this screaming, this victim mentality. This is what has had so many people incarcerated for no reason, because why are you a victim all of a sudden? This is not about you, it's about the Palestinian people. 23,000, over 23,000 have been killed. So how is this about you and women and him not respecting women? How do you know where he's from, who he is? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and I think her role here was not as a journalist. Her role here was to weaponize her femininity, to basically, disparage whatever the Palestinians are going through. And basically, as Brenda said, she is pushing an agenda, because remember when the guest asked her, is Israel a democracy? She said, yes. And then the guest proceeded to tell her how Israel is not a democracy. Basically by starting with, one, the number one person, Netanyahu, is not popular at all in Israel. So the mere fact that you have a leader who is unpopular is how is that a democracy? And then you now see her doubling down on that. I don't know, maybe it's like a deer seeing headlights, and then she just lost it from there and then just went on this racist, Islamophobic rampage.
Yeah. This is the thing about pre-existing beliefs. Like, she already has a certain side that she's picked, and she cannot be unbiased in an interview as important as this.
Yeah. And again, I feel just this very small exchange, I feel, is a microcosm of the larger treatment of Palestinian men, because we've seen the desolation going on. Among the 23,000 people who've been killed, we have children, we have women, and we have men. But we still have in some Western circles, Western liberal feminist circles, there's this idea that Palestinian men, Arabs are rapists, Arabs don't treat their women right, women don't have rights in Palestine. So this is the kind of thinking that she is now bringing to the table, and basically it's embarrassing her whole country, but looking at what the UK is doing in Palestine as well,
She's unmasking herself, basically.
There's a report that's just come out actually analysing the BBC's reporting on the Palestine-Israel conflict since October the 7th till December the 2nd, I believe. And it found that whenever you talked about husbands, it was only referred to the Israelis. When it was talking about fathers, it was only referred to, or disproportionately referred to, the Israelis, even though the amount of Palestinians killed are 20 times the amount of the Israelis killed. So there's clearly bias, but I want to, there's a bit more of the clip to play. I want to play that clip. I'll let you come in after that, and then we're going to widen out the discussion, because we're going to talk about white feminism, because she's not doing this just as Julia Hartley-Brewer. She's reaching into a rich tradition. I don't think she planned to bring up her white womanhood, privilege. But what I think happened is she was losing the debate. And
that's the only card.
It's a Visa card that's accepted at all shops.
Get out of the kitchen. If you can't stand the heat, then just get out of the kitchen.
Yeah. We might get in trouble for that, but you said it, not us. All right, let's play the rest of the clip.
So, no, you are misleading the public now by claiming
Right, I've got 20 seconds left. I'm not even going to bother trying to answer. If you don't think Israel's reaction is acceptable, what would have been an acceptable reaction to you? You've got 10 seconds left.
To end occupation and allow peace to prevail for both people.
That's their reaction. Brilliant. Yeah. Sorry to have been a woman speaking to you, but there you are, Doctor.
Oh man, I am embarrassed on her behalf.
It's embarrassing to say the least. Yeah, I think just going straight to the white feminism, I think in this particular case, it's being used as a vehicle for white supremacy and imperialism generally, where she weaponizes her identity as a white woman to basically manufacture consent for the continued killing of Palestinians, because I mean, we've seen the false rape claims that Hamas raped so and so, but meanwhile, while these claims, these made up allegations are being placed on Palestinians, we have years and years of evidence of Israel actually sexually abusing Palestinians that are in its custody. So I think it's almost twofold, where white femininity, where one is being used to diminish struggles in the global south, anti-imperialism in the global south, and two, is being used to further the agenda of imperialism, in addition to bringing down anti-imperialist agitation or movements in the global south.
Sure, and there's a long tradition of this that we're going to get into. So people say, how does this relate to Africa? Part of the imperialist conquest was not just the white man's burden, but the white woman's burden. The idea that people over there need to be saved from their men. Gatry Spivak, an Indian scholar, called it saving black and brown women from black and brown men. And this is something that's underpinned the imperialist agenda as far back as the 17th century, but as recent as the, you mentioned the conflict in Palestine, but let's not forget the war in Afghanistan was about, saving girls, trying to provide girls with education, even though if you look at the social indexes, during the US occupation of Afghanistan, infant mortality was amongst the highest in the world. Maternal mortality was amongst the highest in the world. Sexual abuse was through the roof. It's like they only cared about women's rights up until they invaded. After that, women's rights, it's not important. So it's just disingenuous. And another thing about Julia Hartley-Brewer is she only ever talks about sexism when it comes to the global south. Just a week ago, she was on another show saying that, I think the woman's called Carol Vorderman, shouldn't run as an MP because on an Instagram pictures, she shows her bum and her chest. So isn't that sexism?
Wow.
Isn't that sexism? Yeah. So she can only see sexism. It's like this. She can only see sexism.
She has a very limit. Yeah, she picks and chooses.
Yeah, she picks and chooses. You know, when there's sexism in her own country, she never calls it out. In fact, sexism doesn't exist in the UK, according to her.
Sorry, finish.
No, that's it. That was it.
The fact that she, especially in this clip, that she could not calmly, articulate her points and ask the relevant questions. Like when you have a losing battle, like what can I come up with? Okay, I'm gonna use the thing. I'm a woman.
Yeah. And I think also the point I feel relying on feminism as a framework for liberation of African women, I think is misguided, because just a random, maybe too far off examples is, on one hand we have these Western organizations, NGOs, who come here with pro-women, content, no FGM, which on paper sound really good. But then on the other hand, looking at what imperialism takes while feminism gives. Take, for example, you come and say, we want to empower women to maybe not spend too much time in the kitchen, to maybe cook better, stop using firewood, start maybe using gas. Then on the other hand, you have these imperialist institutions like the IMF, which come with even more debt burdens. If you have maybe debt, maybe have to pay more because the Americans hike their rates, stuff like that. So while the feminists are preaching peace on one hand, on the other hand, you have the imperialists still going at it. And we did an interview with Mr. Archer from ActionAid a few months ago, where he mentioned that one of the sort of methods used to say combat climate change by institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF is to say, let's give them more loans. That will deal with climate change. But what he found was that when these loans come, instead they do not better. You could find maybe a few local elite could benefit, but the vast majority of people have it rough. Take the austerity measures, for example. When the IMF cuts funding for hospitals, what demographic or what part of society is left to take care of the people who are now disenfranchised as a result of a lack of funding for education, funding for healthcare, stuff like that. So I think when looking at feminism, we should also look at the bigger picture of imperialism and how white liberal feminism operates under that.
Yes, you saved it at the end, because I largely agree with what you say, but I think the framing is wrong, because it's not feminism, it's white liberal feminism or Western-centric feminism. So you mentioned FGM. My mom campaigned against FGM, but she campaigned as a Sudanese woman in Sudan with Sudanese communities.
In her community.
Yeah, in her community. It wasn't something imposed from the outside or posed by the above. So, of course, feminism is a noble cause. It has to be intersectional, has to take into account race, take into account class, take into account imperialism. But the problem we have with white feminism is it does none of those things. None of those things. We saw them celebrating the fact that some of the largest weapon manufacturers are now headed by women. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's their idea of feminism. Or Hillary Clinton, who was a warmonger, being
an icon of feminism,
being potentially becoming the president of the United States. She failed, but that would have been seen as some sort of triumph for feminism. And it's a pretty crude joke, but I'll say it. Frankie Boyle, who's a Scottish comedian in the UK.
Hillary Clinton was a very particular type of feminist. She didn't believe in female genital mutilation unless it was performed by an American drone.
Wow.
And that talks about, there's another example. I was reading about Frederick Douglass and his schism with a woman called Susanna B. Anthony, who was part of the suffrage movement and pushing for women's rights. And she said to him, as much as you've been hard done by, you would not trade places with a white woman. And it's for some weird reason, she must have believed that. And she's saying this to a slave, a former slave, who'd been tortured, who'd been trafficked. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is essentially what she was trying to say is, the movement for blacks should not become before the movement for white women. Now, not understanding that the African community that were enslaved included women, the people that were being raped in the plantation were women. So it's always been a disregard to, as far as white feminism concerned, people like you shouldn't speak. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't have a voice. You don't have a voice, and they're going to tell you what you need to become equal.
And
wow, that last part. Tell me what I need.
Since we said white feminists said she don't have a voice, we've got to give her a voice now. So Brenda.
No, you were going to say something. William, you're going to say something?
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel just maybe hammering the point about the joke you said. Take, for example, now where majority of the people that have been killed in Gaza are women and children. For a liberal, for them, having half of the workforce in Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin, that's being women. That's well and good. That's empowerment. But then this same empowerment of these women is being used to oppress women on the other side of the world. And then maybe as a last point, the case of Emmett Till. This is just going back to this lady.
History.
Yeah, white women tears being used against people of color. Emmett Till was lynched by a white mob for allegedly whistling at a white woman.
Yes, and the worst part of the story is, as she became old, she admitted that he never whistled her.
With no consequence.
With no consequence.
And the thing is, it's something that's already still happening, like even in incarceration, like black men, like in America, black men are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of crimes than even their white counterparts. And it can be seen up until now, because just the other day I was reading a story of a man called Clarence L. Moses who served 28 years in prison for a lady who said, you know what, I saw this man in my dream and I was a victim and he raped me, and this man had never seen this woman in his
28 years.
28 years. And he, you've lost 28 years, you come up because this white woman came and said, I point you, William, you raped me, and that's it. There's no judge, jury, everything says you're done. You were talking about this musician, this actor, Jonathan Majors.
Jonathan Majors, he's chased down the street by his white girlfriend. She's attacking him. He's running down the street. And he's trying to get away from her. Who's charged with assault? He is
the one running away.
He is.
Yes.
How?
Because apparently she saw a text on his phone. She tried to grab the phone off him. He then tried to get her phone back off her, but according to the judgment, he was too aggressive in grabbing his phone, and they completely dismissed the part of the bit where he's being chased down the street.
It just goes to show that even as a journalist, of course, like I said, journalistic integrity aside, first of all, she already had bias towards this man from where he's from, for him to say, oh, you're not used to talking to women, clearly. Number 2, this man is just asking, so do you think Israel is there's some democracy in this? Do you think the Palestinian people are suffering? And she's like, you know what, because I have no points to give right now. I don't know what to say. This man he's giving points. I am going to take my coat off and show that I am indeed a woman, and this is why you should just see me like I.
Yeah. Well, I guess the positive thing, and we'll probably end on this point, is this is at least being recognised. The first part of overcoming something is recognition. Accepting what it is, because of these videos of the Karens in Central Park and all these other places. It's actually challenged this idea of white womanhood that's being weaponized against. Not just to be clear, it's predominantly people of color.
Yeah, I was going to ask if this is the same. Yeah.
But Julian Assange, it started with rape allegations, which are now being dropped. And now he's facing 175 years for exposing UK and US war crimes. It was always about UK and US war crimes, but they used white womanhood to get him, to force him into the Ecuadorian embassy, and then use the fact that he ran to Ecuadorian embassy to say he skipped bail and then put him in a maximum security prison with terrorists and mass murderers. So yeah, it's a weapon, but finally we're seeing that weapon being exposed for what it is. Of course, there are very genuine victims of sexual abuse.
True.
Of course, you know, there is sexism against all women, including white women.
True.
We're just against the weaponization, the very blatant weaponization that was on display in this video. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just add on to what you said. The fact that, you know, these, say the false rape allegations, for example, all they do is to hurt genuine cases of rape. Because, for example, say, stories of, made-up stories of rape suddenly become prevalent in an area. What happens when a woman is actually, you know, subjected to rape? If suddenly the society will be like, you know, having, in as much as they might not outright dismiss her, they'll have doubts. So this is the kind of stuff, I think, that does not help the women liberation movement. If anything, it just sets them back.
It sets us back. I mean, I feel that in situations like this where women, I mean, certain people, because it's not all women who are blanketed in one situation, but just that weaponizing, like using your privilege to you know, to attack other people. Like people have been speaking on, there should be systems in place for such people to be, you know, to be charged, to be, you know, for charges to be, you know, put on them, because you, in a situation like this, if it was someone else in a I'm just imagining like just this screaming or shouting wolf, and a person has been taken to jail for a number of years, and some of these women who have been in these situations, who have used their privilege to put other people, I mean, to incarcerate other people, nothing has been done to them. And I feel like for her, this should be her last day on air, because if you cannot be impartial in a situation, if you cannot conduct an interview and, you know, use journalistic, what's the word? Integrity and ethics. Because this is not about her. She made it about her. This is about the Palestinian people and everything that they are going through right now. There's a bombardment, there's a genocide happening. How did you turn this and make it about you and about you being a woman? How does gender come into play? I think this is just racial manipulation. I mean, gender manipulation, sorry.
Yeah, gender does come into play, but it comes into play the way that William mentioned. The amount of women that have been killed in Gaza. There was a woman shot the other day as she was holding her son, as she was evacuating, while she was waving a white flag. That's where gender. That one
makes sense.
That's where gender comes into play. But yeah, okay, I think we've come to an end. One thing I'll just state, you know, because we don't want this to be misconstrued on the internet. Things can be misconstrued. Most rape charges and allegations go unpunished. So most victims of rape never really get justice. So we don't want to make it seem that most women...
We're not running cover for rapists.
Yeah, we're making it seem that most women that accuse people of rape are lying. What we are saying is that in this incident and many other incidents that we mentioned historically and contemporary, is that white women have been able to weaponize their womanhood to put predominantly people of colour in trouble in the eyes of the law. Or in the eyes of public opinion, and that is something that we're challenging in this video. But anyway, until next time, I've been Ahmed Cabello,
William Sakawa,
Brenda Moy.
Peace.